you very much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers podcast, which is also being streamed right now to LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you very much. Find me on your favorite podcast directory in the new year. It'll be there, but you can always watch the replay wherever you're watching. So, wherever you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, on LinkedIn, you could just go after and replay it should you miss any part of this. Welcome. Gathered a great panel as always. Every year it seems like I have to try to have the same people back. Talk about job search trends of this coming year and talk about what happened this past year. And as usual, I have the people that write a lot about it. So as we write a lot about it, we kind of are very much in tune to what's going on in the big picture of things. So I just want to make some introductions. You'll see at the top of the screen Robin Ryan. She is a Forbes contributor. Of course, you can find her at robinryan.com. How are you, Robin?
I'm good today.
Good deal. And I don't know, you look a little different than you did, like more vibrant. I mean, not that you never look
Oh, thank you.
but I am just pleasantly surprised. So,
Wait a minute. What does that mean?
Yeah.
not
Just
I
keep
wasn't
going,
getting.
Mark.
I'm sorry. I'm
Keep
sorry.
going.
It's been a year, so I take it as a compliment, Mark. That's good.
You're getting. I think he meant you're getting younger. I think that's what he meant. That every
And of
year you're
course,
getting
we have
younger, 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 and it's really bizarre.
no, I did not say that.
Well, no, that's good. That's a good thing to say.
Maybe you shut
Putting
up.
words, putting words in my mouth. Hannah Morgan is on careersherper.net. How are you?
I'm awesome.
You know, I always hesitate because there's a careersherper.com, which you don't want to go to, people. Go to
Well, yeah,
careersherper.net.
just a different business.
And Jack,
Yes.
everyone, recruiter.io, Forbes contributor, and of course, a frequent guest and co-host on the Voice of Job
Yeah.
Seekers. How are you, sir?
Good. Good. Except it's cold here
Good
now
deal.
in New
Yeah.
Jersey. I'm going to Florida. I can't take this.
Yeah, well, those are options if you
Yeah.
want to be in the warm sun. Though February and January and February gets a little icy, having lived there 12 years. So just so you know, it's not all warm unless you live in Miami. If you live in Miami, it doesn't get too cold, so that's probably a good thing. So let's go ahead and start it off. We have several topics that we're going to kind of navigate and go through here as time allows.
Mhm.
And I will do the best I can to moderate us through seamlessly as possible. Should you have any comments for us, if you're watching, feel free to comment on any of the platforms. We should be able to see your comment. I know my guests may or may not be watching live themselves, but we'll do the best we can, and I'll try to navigate the chat while everybody's contributing. So please enjoy our discussion. Uh, we're talking, well, everybody's talking about AI, and I guess everybody has their favorite platform, whether it's Bard or Chat GPT or a whole bunch of others. And there are people who are developing it and turning it to something that they may find or uh, their audience may find a little bit more useful. We'll see about that. But the best use for AI for what we know right now for 2024, and I want to get you guys' thoughts and ideas on how it will evolve. I'll tell you right now, like with Chat GPT, right now, I guess it has a set point of 2022. So whatever it aggregates into information comes from that particular time, if I'm not correct. I hope I am. That's what it was when I've been using it lately. So I'm going to start with
Yeah.
Robin. Love your thoughts on how AI, or how do you see it evolving here in the next year or two?
Well, I'm not a fan. So I'm going to come right out and make a stand
Really?
there. Not a
Well,
fan for
good.
resume
Good.
writing
Yes,
or cover
indeed you
letter.
are.
I think it's going to be helpful with people doing email and a lot of work in the office. And here's my reason. One of my clients is a chief operations officer, and she's in the business. So she said, it's too soon. And what she did was, she went into ChatGPT, asked it to write her a cover letter, fed the information. And it came back and it says, when you put it through the AI detector, it said, well, 49% likely that was written by AI. So then she said, I rewrote it. There was no similarities. I wrote it myself. I put it through it. And they said, it's only 6% chance it was written by a human. So she took the one she wrote herself. She submitted it and got an interview. The moral of this story is Chat GPT does not think. And so consequently, it's pulling information from other places. Typically, a cover letter will start maybe strong opening, gets very weak as it goes through. So not a fan for job search right now.
That's interesting. So you think that, well, of course, I think we've all kind of have come to a conclusion that writing a resume and writing a cover letter may not be as useful because it's giving pretty general feedback on it. But do you think it could? Do you think that there might be some other uses other than resume and cover letter?
Besides that, where I see it really working the most is in the office, where people have to write reports, where they're trying to write emails or detailed summaries. It's helping people who aren't good writers and need to communicate. I think that you're going to see more and more of that. It's going to help too with providing information that the average person might not have known themselves, and fast. So in other words, I can go to the internet, look it up, or I can stick it in, I like Claude. And if you go in there and you put something in, you ask a question, it comes back, within seconds. So I think that there's a lot of advantages. And for those of us that write, you can tell it the topic and ask for some headlines. And it's pretty interesting. Some of them are really good that come back.
Right. Yeah. Hannah?
Okay, so I think that any of these artificial intelligence tools are awesome for market research. They're a research assistant. I think that so often tell our clients to go Google, right? Go Google the answer to this, but there's not enough context. So with any of these tools, chat, Bard, whatever you're going to use, you can sort of ask it a question. I'm unhappy in my role as an executive recruiter. I'm looking for alternative job titles that I might be able to transition to. What are some of those alternative job titles for an executive recruiter? Right? And
Interesting.
so
Right.
it's not saying that those things are absolutely, but it's an idea generator. Okay. So now those people who have no idea what they want to do can at least have a starting point. Another, tool you could use, another way you could use this for research is, and you'd have to use a tool that one of the AI tools that's actually searching current information. I like using Perplexity. I learned about that. Perplexity AI.
That's new.
I learned about it from oh shoot. Well, anyway, a wonderful coach, Marie Zimenoff. Sorry, Marie Zimenoff of Career Thought Leaders. She introduced it to me.
Yes. Okay.
But you could use that to say, I want to work for a medium-sized company in the San Diego area that specializes in blah 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 blah. And guess what? It's going to come up with some of those lists. Or you may say, I used to work for XYZ company. Who are some of the competitors that do similar work across the United States? Right. So it can help. It's not the finished product, right? It doesn't mean that those answers are absolutely correct, but it's a starting point, a jumping off point. So I love to think of it as a research assistant, and for drafting, whatever it is you
Yeah.
want to draft.
Yeah, I haven't used it for drafting, but a lot of research has definitely gone from my end. How about you, Jack?
I'm addicted to AI, and Perplexity is like my go-to first. I'll try each one. Like I'll do Perplexity, Claude, Google Bard, some others, and I find myself not going to Google it anymore. Where I'll go right. My first thing is to go to AI now and just figure it out.
Right.
And to me, it's both like professionally, let's say I'm writing a piece, it makes my life so much easier. Because I don't know if you find this out, Hannah and Robin. Like, let's say it's a subject I'm not really familiar with. Let's talk about, maybe it's Starbucks with the unionization and strikes. I don't know enough what's going on there. I'll just put in like, hey, what's going on with Starbucks and the strikes and the,
Right.
what have you. And then like in like wicked fast, like it just comes out there. And
Mhm.
now I know. So like, which would have taken me half an hour to just kind of Google and look over here and look over there. It just comes right out. And, and I agree with you, Robin, you're taking that. I never use it to say, oh, I'm going to now take that copy and paste it somewhere else, because a lot of times I find out it's not accurate. And that's a little kind of frightening, but also it's like a wake up that you can't completely trust. I was writing something and it was like 60,000 people in Wall Street lost their job, right? And I thought, wow, that's
Mhm.
crazy. And I'm doing some more homework and I'm like, wait, this number seems too big. And then try as hard as I couldn't find anyone to corroborate that 60,000 lost their job. I don't know where they got that from, but if I didn't say, wait a minute, let me do some more homework, I would have maybe put that as the title and I would have been lambasted. Like, what are you talking about? This is
Yeah.
crazy. So
Right.
it's,
Fact check.
Yeah.
yeah. And I think what you were saying, Hannah, that it's like your co-pilot. So it's not as if you just put your brain on hold, let them do all the work. It's this kind of your assistant who could help you out, do that. And you both write, so you could appreciate it.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you're just staring at a blank page, that's the worst thing. So now if you could get, let's say, some outline,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, it makes life so much easier and so much better.
Yeah.
And for fact finding. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm totally like addicted to it. I can't wait till it keeps getting better and better and better.
Right. Yeah. I use it to after I've written a piece, I go ahead and put some of the phrases
Mhm.
in to see if there's anything else that I could pick up or gather some additional ideas. I like it for the afterthought. And sometimes it may fill in a couple of blanks I didn't think of. And I'm going, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that works
Mhm.
out pretty
Mhm.
well. But the other thing I thought was interesting, have you tried AIing your name?
No.
I think you should. And I think that's going to be a thing, just like you Google your name, or whether it's a
I'm
vanity
writing it
or if
down.
you want to see what's out there. Because there's some very interesting intelligence. Now, when I did it a year ago, uh, it took a moment for it to prompt. Now I just put in my name and it brings me right up. And I did Robin, I did you,
Mhm.
and Hannah, I did you, and it gave in Chat GPT, and it gave a short little version. Jack, your name is so
It's so yeah.
common that it says, "I'm sorry, I'm so
Yeah.
confused." But I think, having said that, though, for out of all practical advice, if I were a job seeker just trying to build an online presence, I would try to have AI Google, my LinkedIn, any other social profiles, and any conferences I go to line up the same way so that whenever somebody tries to find
Mhm.
me or try to research me, they have to just put in whatever name I decide to present, whether it's a middle initial or whether it's a whole name. You guys know I use my middle name. Uh, and it brings me right up. So people have no doubt that's exactly who I am. Plus, now Google, I don't know if you Googled yourself lately, but my picture comes up
Mm.
now when you put my name in, which I think is very interesting. That had never happened before, but it happened recently. So I think with all the sophistication that is beginning to be built with AI, um, is probably a good idea to start lining things up as far as your name. And I don't think it's too late should you need to change any variation of your name, but consider how you're going to appear online so that you can appear everywhere pretty consistently. Any other thoughts before we move on, Maurice?
I'm just looking at some of the comments, and a lot of recruiters are using it for Boolean searches. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely have heard that, and we've already heard the example. Jack uses it for paraphrasing, so yeah, it's awesome.
That would-
Yeah, I think it is great for paraphrasing, although It's not 100% dramatically, entice. You still have to tweak it some. You still got to
I
play
So,
think
with it. But on that, people are expecting too much for them to for it to do everything for you. It's not there yet. It's probably a long way from there. But should you want some inspiration or you want some deeper insight on some things that might be a little bit more obvious, then that's going to work out
so.
great for you. You were going to say
Yeah, I
something,
wanted
Hannah?
to say that I think that AI is infiltrating the marketplace, the workforce, and I think one of the things that job seekers can do to give themselves the competitive advantage is to better understand how could AI be used in the role or in the company that I'm interviewing with, and how can I get
Right.
smart about understanding its use and application for this job and in this company so that I can speak intelligently about it. Who knows how up on AI some of the employers are. A lot of them are just really hanging back on this. They're not embracing it. So I think that job seekers can do a lot to self-teach, teach themselves and get up on it so that
Mhm.
they at least have a good baseline understanding and can have a conversation around it.
And I think there are some opportunities to be
mhm,
had should you master it before everybody else and become acclimated because you get in early, you're an early
yeah.
adopter, you can use that to further your career in a lot of ways. I remember when back in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, when Google really wasn't a big thing, I learned how to use it and some of the different shortcuts, and I was able to make some
Mhm.
really good contract money from using it because there were people. The university I was working with at the time on a contract that was pretty nice because few people knew how to Google and knew how to navigate it at the time. So all that to say is those kind of opportunities can come if you learn and have a focus on it, and it'll probably help
I
you
want
out. Let's move
and I
on
want
to
to
another.
and I want to add something to what Hannah said. This tool, if that's what we want to call it, is moving at lightning speed. And the biggest thing to pay attention to is Microsoft has 49% of ChatGPT now, and Amazon just put billions behind Claude. And so, if you're looking at some of these organizations when they're putting that kind of money into them, these are going to be revolutionary. You're talking about companies that are movers and shakers. And so, 2 years from now, everybody's going to be using this and it's going to be good.
And it's going to be real
Yeah.
time. It's going to be real time, and people will be able to get things and get news and get information and insights immediately. So I could see seeing the news headline and then going to AI and then getting more in-depth information. If you're a writer, if you're writing about it, then definitely that could be something that you can be on top of in a very timely manner. Because I think the speed of information is going to matter a whole lot more here in the future than it ever has before. So let's go ahead and move on to interviewing questions. And even though there are things that are staying the same, uh, most interview questions have not changed in the last 30 or 40 years. I think there are some things that can change and will change in new environments where there's more hybrid, there's more technology, and there's more of the use that it's going to really matter because they want to make sure that you are landing in the 21st century is probably the first point of attack for a lot of in your view, Hannah, what are some questions that people are tripping up? Maybe you thought of some things where we used to answer one way, we should answer another, or whatever view should you come through. What is your thoughts?
So a couple of
Oops.
I don't appear on screen. Oh,
There you are. I'm sorry.
there I am. Welcome back. One of the questions, obviously, being able to answer, tell me about yourself in a concise 2-minute window of time is so important. Speaking it with confidence and with enthusiasm. I don't know why that. I do know why, but I don't know why. It is one of those questions that every you should expect in every interview.
Mhm.
So. that's the one we need to really continue to remind job seekers to practice, to hone, to own that, right? I have had a lot of clients. One of the other questions that
Hmm.
I think a lot of people don't know how to answer, and it can be tricky, is why are you leaving, or why did you leave your past job?
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
so working with people, it's you this is not a the interview is not a confessional, so you don't want to give the
Okay.
real, like, oh, my work was suffering and I didn't get along with my manager, he was really demanding, and so
Right.
it wasn't a cultural fit, so I had to leave, whatever. Though we just need to find sort of a safe reason that can explain a lot but not too much, and move on, because the
Mhm.
interviewer really just wants to understand if there's a problem, right? Are there any red flags? But I've also heard from some of the executive clients that I've been working with, and this may be a result of the last 2 years, that they have not been asking, why are you leaving, or why did you leave your last job? So who
Mm.
knows? Maybe moving forward, that's a trend where, you know what? I don't think
Mhm.
so, but you never know. That so many people have left jobs or been let go from jobs in the last couple of years that maybe it doesn't even matter anymore why, why they're looking for a new job, because who hasn't looked for
Mhm.
a new job? Maybe
Mhm.
the question they really should be asking is, why do you want to work here? Or
Mhm.
what can't you get from your past job and your career goals that you are looking for next? I mean, ask a more specific question. So we'll see what that means. The other question that I think a lot of the executive clients that I've been working with are facing is a more like a hypothetical planning question. So if you
Mhm.
were to the question might be, if you were to step in this role, what would be the first three things that you would do to solve our X problem?
Mhm.
Interesting. I think executive searches are a whole lot different for what a lot of people look for because this is a different kind of conversation. And a little bit because I know for other people who are really on in the rank and file, many times they feel like those questions are a trap, uh, or they're being led to the slaughter, so to speak. But I don't think that's all it is. I'm not saying that's everybody, but I think sometimes those questions, uh, you know, depending on where you land the conversation, I think it depends on where your qualifications lie and how well you present yourself, they don't have to be a trap. And I
So
think
isn't
people sometimes ask that, answer like that.
So here's the thing, and I think that that's a really good point that you made, Mark, is that when we're talking about these trends and for job seekers and job search,
Right,
uh, they don't apply to every job in every
Right.
industry at every level, right?
right.
So what we're doing is giving a broad brush picture of what's happening, but
Hmm.
each person has to have has to do some research to really understand in their specific niche and with their specific industry at their particular level what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Jack?
Well, if I could answer it in a different way, what I find challenging is twofold. One, I don't see that there's a lot of training of HR and hiring managers how to really interview. So I think they
We
rely
talked about that. We
Yes,
talked about that
yeah,
that's
in the
true.
last.
so what ends up happening, I think, in my opinion, that they default to those standard cliche questions. And in my opinion, that's not terribly helpful because that people brush up. If they're smart and they've done their homework and they have, Robin or Hannah as their career, advisor, you could say, hey, this is what you have to watch out for. So they're kind of prepared for it. So it's like a nonsense. It's like it doesn't make sense. What I find, what I find personally more efficient and effective is just to have a conversation with somebody and to really
Hmm.
just chat and get the sense of who they are, what they're about, their skills, and that organic conversation. I would find out so much more from a person than if I were asking them those like, quote unquote cliche type, where do you see yourself in 5 years and so forth. Um, to me, it seems like it hasn't changed for decades,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's right for like maybe training HR people, or maybe certain people could be deputized. That's your job to do interviews, and you're going to be a really great interviewer,
Mhm.
and this way you could find the best talent, or like stop with like these just basic questions and really just get to really listen to your candidate and hear what they're saying and just try to understand what their needs are, what their wants are. I think we lose out about that. And especially when you have like 6, 7, 8 different interviews for like mid to senior level professionals. And then you get it not only once, but you're getting it from 5, 6 different people, and
Mhm.
it's just a time suck for everybody. It makes it uncomfortable for everybody. Job seekers get so angry and frustrated because then at the end of it, they just get ghosted anyway. So like the whole system is kind of messed up.
I'm going to come back to that, Jack. Hold on. I want to get Robin's take. Robin's written a whole ton about
Mhm.
this. So this is her. She's probably one of the top interview specialists that I've read in the past years and over the last decade and a half. So I definitely want to hear before I ask this one magic question. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, there's the biggest thing that I find is situational questions, and so many employers ask them. People
Mhm.
don't know how to tell the work story. So if you're being asked, tell us about a time, give us an example, this is specific. You can't just wing it and say, well, I did this. It has to be, well, when I was working for this employer, and this was the problem, this is what I did, this is the outcome. So I call those stories. And those work stories you have to think about in advance. You've got to write them out. You have to be crystal clear. And most people make a mistake if they don't tell you who's there, where it is, and the person's trying to listen to you and figure out, I wonder where they did this.
Mm.
These require a lot of time to think about. I always recommend come up with some good work stories that'll solve, a lot of possible questions, write them out. You don't have to memorize them, but familiarize yourself. And then
Right.
I do a lot of career coaching, a lot of it. And the number one question I've heard for the last decade has not changed. And that is, what's your greatest weakness? And they all freak and they all roll their eyes. And whether you are a new college grad, you are an executive, or anything in between, that seems to be the most difficult question that they tell me they get asked. And, some of them are like, well, what should I say? And people really are at a loss. I wrote a recent article on Forbes, and I have started changing the way I'm teaching people. So let me share that really quickly. In the old days, we
Okay.
would just say, give them a moot point. But what I'm telling people now is think about something that was a weakness because you did not know how to do it. So an example might be, well, I was a new student in college and I'd never taken a computer science class before. It was required. Oh, and I liked it, right? And then I took more, and now I'm a computer science major. But when they ask you about a greatest weakness, a good thing to say to start out was, well, when I entered college, I'd had no programming classes. So it was really a weakness because a lot of other people in my class did. And then I took classes, I spent a lot of time, I got tutoring, and I have really mastered Python. I'm really an excellent programmer now. So
Mhm.
notice what I did. I equated don't know how with a weakness. What did you do to learn it? And now you've mastered it. That seems to be very, very effective in the marketplace right now.
Yeah, that is a very effective. It's always been effective that way. But I think between all of you, your comments, you all have hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways. And I want to ask this based off of Jack's question. Jack's response is, whose responsibility is it to turn the interview into a really productive business conversation? Is it the job seeker who's interviewing, answering? Maybe the storytelling will play a big part of it, but sometimes it's not. Interview dynamics could be really difficult. But Robin, directed you in your view, whose is it, the onus on the interviewer or the person, the job candidate, to turn that into a conversation to make it so that it'll help gear towards a result and a resolve to whether I could be hired or not?
Well, I think the style for many HR people and hiring managers is an interrogation, and that doesn't work. If
Right.
you're doing a conversation, I see a lot more one-on-one interviews. Don't see the panels like you used to before. That gives you an opportunity to ask good questions as you go along, learn about the job, and let them learn about you. And don't expect the interview to be a master at this. The interviewer probably isn't unless they've been, highly trained. So
Most of
feel
them.
free to shape the interview by offering work examples, whether the question directly said, tell us and give us. But also, you don't have to wait to the end to ask your questions. Intersperse them. It's like you were talking to a friend or a colleague. If you approach it that way as the job hunter, because we can't control what the HR people do and the hiring manager does, I think you're going to find it's a lot smoother. They're going to really like you. You're going to be more appealing. They're going to think you're smarter. And they're going to like the critical thinking that's coming by your contribution in that respect. It seems to be working a lot better for people that are able to do that.
Yeah, yep. Jack, I want to get
Yeah.
you in here and respond to that.
Yeah,
Who do you think the oldest?
well, I wholeheartedly agree with Robin, because it's for if a job seeker right away takes charge, it could backfire and make the person feel like that the candidate is a little too aggressive and might rub the interviewer the wrong way. But I think the onus is really on the company itself, so that, and I like how you walked through everything, Robin. But it's so frustrating. I imagine you were frustrating too, where like, why do you have to go into detail what my weakness is? Let's have that, as you pointed out, Robin, let's have that conversation and make it organic. And that's where I think you get the real juice from, because when it's this organic and this manufactured kind of phony conversation about what's your weakness, and now you got to tell some story about your weakness. Let's focus on, you're coming here for this job, right? Here's the job description. There are 10 different points in the job description. Let's figure out, do you do all this stuff? Like, let's talk about it. Do you do this? How do you do it? Why do you do it? Do you like doing it? I mean, obviously you wouldn't do it the way I'm saying it now, like boom, boom, boom. You'd see it more like a normal human being, but you would have that interaction where you talk about, hey, here's what the job is about. Here's what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. Have you done this before? Do you like doing this? And so forth. And then you have that, as you were saying, Robin, like that back and forth, where that's where all of a sudden now you get comfortable with each other and you get a vibe of like, oh, all right, I'm liking these. Or you could also find out, whoa, wait, I didn't know all these things, that it wasn't a job description. I didn't know I'm gonna have to do all of these things. Now I have to rethink. You're paying X for this, but you're asking me for this. So then you could also learn, maybe this isn't the right job for me. Maybe, but at least by having that conversation and dispensing with, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell me about a time when, that just takes, in my opinion, takes away from, let's get really to it and let's have that real conversation, and each person listening to one another and actively listening to them and responding. And so then you could really feel like, oh, okay, this could be a good fit or not a good fit. So that's where I come from, and it drives me crazy that
But
like
But
it's just,
Jack,
yeah,
but here's the problem, right? And
yeah,
there's one of the reasons why I think we've gotten to where we are today with this is that if you are interviewing 5 different people, how can you ensure that you're collecting the same information from
hmm,
every candidate? And that's one of the they're trying to make this sort of equal,
hmm,
right? And that is why they want to make sure they ask the same questions of each candidate. It doesn't mean that they can't ask questions outside of those questions, but
hmm.
they need to have an apple to apple comparison across the board with the candidates they're looking at. And if you're having a bad day and you don't ask the questions in the same way today as you did yesterday of the next candidate, then who loses?
Well, that's a very interesting thing, because somebody had put in the question already. The kind of that you all's responses and perhaps some of mine didn't address is that the first interview isn't necessarily in front of a person that had that conversation. That first interview could be video. That first interview is often the phone. They're often doing it through a phone screening. And it's not always with a hiring manager or a person that's making a decision. That first person is doing an intake. You would like in a diet. Okay, what did you eat last week? And you give them that information, and that's part of that. And they don't like it, and they're assessing it based on that. Then you won't be able to have anybody's conversation. But I think all that to say, I think this is a good question. Is that in 2024, is that first interview, for honestly, for a lot of people, they've already had their first interviews of video, and an AI video, and we won't mention all the companies that use it first. It's lousy, but that's the way the trends are beginning to take place. In fact, it's probably not really a trend, so to speak, anymore. But having said that, people have to kind of read the room or read the tool, whatever applies to them, and they're going to have to respond accordingly if they can have a conversation. But if you can have a one-on-one conversation, whether it's phone, video, and all that, a lot of times it matters how you tell the story. If the story is a fairy tale where you're just the moderator and you're doing a monologue, that might be one thing. But if you can engage the interviewer, then with the story, if it begins to resonate with them, and that's something that should be thought out beforehand, if you can, then to get the interaction, I think that's where a lot of the conversation, and sometimes it is the job seekers way of setting the tone, not taking over the interview, not one asking the questions, although there's a point in time for a lot of that. But the way you tell and the way you engage the interviewer, especially when they're lousy interviewers, to get them involved in that part and get them involved in the story. And that way you also get a little buy in, that way. Robin, I know you might have a take on that. Uh,
there, there's a there's one thing that I think people have to be aware of. You're not necessarily competing against five other people. Many of these companies, especially in high demand jobs, have found a candidate. They've done a lot of search. Jack will agree with this too. They found search. They found somebody they're interested in. The recruiter talks to them. They pass them to the hiring manager. They oftentimes will then pass them to a couple peers and then the boss's boss. And in a short amount of time, they make a decision about that single person. So I think that that's been a huge change. Obviously, the tech industry, when it was so hot, they had to move. I mean, a lightning speed. They were hiring people, talk to them on Monday, and by Wednesday, they had a job offer. I'm still finding in a lot of roles that whole process of you're not competing against others, you're almost competing against yourself. So you've got to keep in mind that you really have to be prepped. You've got to know about that company. You've got to do as much research as possible, really understand that job. And that's going to make the difference. If you don't do those things, because people don't prep, that's the biggest problem. And if you don't do that, a lot of times you are going to not get the
right.
job.
Right. Yep. Yep. There's a lot of hours that go into real prep. One, most people just kind of find some information about the company, think that's enough, and the best ones they interview do a whole lot more research than just an hour of a biography. Hannah, you have any parting thoughts before we move on?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. How
Now
about
let's
you,
keep
Jack?
going.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're getting to the good stuff here. Let me go, Marsha. I want to get you all's predictions of what you see is going to be trends for 2024, and how that's going to affect the job seeker nation universal, so to speak. That's going to affect most job seekers. Hannah, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's still going to take companies a while to fill jobs. So we've seen an extension in the number of days it takes companies to fill jobs.
Mhm.
During the peak of things, and then in the tech sector, they were speeding it up. But in many other companies and many other occupations, we're really seeing that length of time between uh, the posting the job out there and then getting the person in house taking like 40, 44, as much as 64
Mhm.
days to fill some of these jobs. So I don't think that's going away. I think companies are using that longer interviewing process as a means of evaluating risk, right? Our economy still is not predictable. And I think that unpredictability makes companies always a little leery. And there's always that fear of hiring the wrong person. So I think we're going to continue to see a longer time to fill jobs, longer than anybody wants, and that's important for job seekers to understand because they need to budget and that means they need to work hard to maintain their momentum while and interview with other companies at the same time. They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. So that to me, I think is like the biggest thing. And there's so many other factors, and I'm sure Robin and Jack have other
Yeah, yeah,
things.
Jack.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Hannah was saying and agree that I think for the foreseeable future, we're looking at this. They had the JOLTS report the other day, which showed that there was a rapid decline in job postings. You also saw an increase in unemployment claims. Then when you put on top of that, we still have, despite what the government is saying about inflation, everyone knows like inflation is still really ridiculously high and costs are high across the board. And we still don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East. We don't know how it's going to kind of play out in the Ukraine. So I think what's going to happen is these companies, in my experience, and I always find out, and I'm sure, Hannah and Robin, you see this too. When companies are confident of the future, they're willing to hire and move quickly. Conversely, when they're worried about what's going to happen in the future, they pull back. So I'm thinking probably most likely is going to happen is that it's going to be kind of a clunky couple of months because these things don't turn overnight.
Right.
They're going to worry about, hey, there's so many unknowables and things are not looking that great. Think about it. We have $1 trillion plus in credit card debt. We have people who are record levels of people dipping into their retirement savings just to have money. The amount of money they have as emergency funds is like so small. So there's a lot of pain out there. So when it comes to like what I know best, I know I can't really speak intelligently about like the frontline and blue collar workers, but with white collar mid to senior level, they get paid a lot. So those are the easy ones to cut. And what really opened my eyes too is that I don't know if you guys will remember, like during the holidays, they would never lay off people. That wasn't a thing. It was a taboo. Now, just the other day, Spotify laid off what was 1,500 people. Twilio laid off people. Cisco, broadband, Goldman Sachs is laying off. Citigroup is laying off, and that never happened. And so if they're doing that now, that's kind of a little bit of a frightening thing because if you're heartless enough to let go of people during the holidays, I mean, to me personally, that seems like an affront to every employee because how can you trust your companies if they're just going to pull the rug out to you under like when you're waiting to go in and take a trip and see your grandma and grandpa and have your kids open up presents and you're ruining it? This is nuts. So I think it's going to be a challenging time for the near future. However, what's interesting is the stock market has been doing really well and has been rebounding. And not that is the be all and end all, but that's where people are betting. It's not theory. Like we're talking, right? We're not putting money on the table. We're not gambling. But when you're buying stocks and bonds and securities, you have skin in the game. And they're betting that the future is going to be well. That's why they're buying stocks. So, and they're smart people, who are putting a big amount of money. So they're thinking, hey, everything I'm talking about is like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. So I don't know. So to be very fair, I don't know. Like the data on one side shows that it looks like there'll still be layoffs and downsizing and slow walking the hiring process. But then the Wall Street crowd, and they're not always right, but they're betting that things are going to get better. So I don't know. I'd rather be wrong about what I said and have things get better. So I'll admit, I'm not sure. To me, it's like flipping a coin, especially when we have like trillions of dollars in debt. Like, how do you get out of that? Like, so we do have a lot of things to worry about.
Yeah. The economics of it all is really something in the big landscape. And should things fall economically, jobs are
exactly.
affected.
See, that's it. That's it. Because that's why it's so sensitive to it. Like when you see these things, and you get scared, and these people like Jamie Dimon and big CEOs, they're like, all right, let's pull back. Like Jamie Dimon sold a ton of stock. It's just not really making you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Robin, some thoughts from you?
Yeah, I see three big things that impact all the job hunters and the HR people and the executives I talk to. The first one is the remote battle is being lost, and hybrid is the way we're going forward. If you put an obstacle up that you absolutely have to have remote, and I'm not saying there aren't jobs out there because there are some, but many of them are now being moved back into the office. And for a lot of people, that's a good thing. They now feel like they belong to something,
Mhm.
that they have people to network with. The collaboration, which is such a big thing, leads to innovation, and you have to be together. There's no loyalty on Zoom. You don't belong to anything. So that's the first thing. And the plus is with that hybrid, I'm starting to see a lot of people got Friday afternoon off. And so there's actually a lot of HR talk between going 5 days a week to four. The two other things that I see is a lot more stability with people who have jobs, as opposed to every 6 months somebody else comes out with a carrot and they're jumping to a new role. Now people are a little more concerned about, ooh, well, how stable is the new company? At least my job here is secure. So the fastest way to lose your employees is you start laying off a lot of people. You're talking about the numbers aren't working, you don't have enough money, revenues are way down. That's going to make people nervous.
Mhm.
The stability in the market, though, the job market, is good for everybody because people stay longer and have the opportunity to get promoted. And I think that that's a really important thing. When you jump so much, it's very hard to get promoted. And the most important thing to me is I see more, as I talk to the job hunters, more and more demand for work life balance. That mental health seems to be their concern above everything else. They have been depressed, they have had anxiety over too much work, too many hours. You send them home and you think, okay, it's going to be great. But then you find you're working from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, and then you got more emails. And it, the big change that I'm hearing, and I think employers are starting to understand it, where you see abusers are people that have too much work and not enough people to do it. Either they don't have the finance to pay for the extra staff, or they cannot find them. But the people themselves, and particularly those people in their 20s, they're the ones that are saying, hey, I got to have work life balance. I'll do my job, I'll work really hard, but I am not working 60 hours a week. And I see that as a really big change, a positive change, but a big change. And it'll be interesting to see how do employers deal with the demand that you give people, what they want to. And that is time to not have to be working too many hours, because it burns them out. And we are burning a lot of people out.
Yeah. I think that there are. I'd like to comment on everyone's. I won't because I think we're running up on time. But one of the big trends, and there's two, three things that I've seen that stand out. One is that there's still this gap of hiring back people who worked for staffing agencies and recruiters and HR. I think that's an interesting conversation that we'll be having a lot in 2024. Is where are companies thinking if they find that they're using some other way? Are they just thinking that AI is going to replace a human touch or a particular process? It can't be both in many instances. So I think that is going to be something we'll be talking about for a long time because a lot of my staffing friends, one of them I'm talking to, he's been a VP in the C-suite of staffing agencies, large ones and small ones. He wrote me a note today. He says, large company corporate sucks, hiring sucks, recruiting sucks, everything sucks right now. So we're going to be diving into that conversation. But seems to be the sentiment in a lot of places that where they're supposed to be the hiring pros are being subject to more scrutiny than they ever had before. So what's going to become of hiring here in 2024 and beyond that? So that's going to be something to see. Another thing I've been noticing is that older workers see a lot of articles that companies are going to hire older workers for the sixth year in a row. they're they're going to hire all these older workers. Lots of advice given, but not a lot of older workers being hired. But I think it's going to come to make a break they're going to have to hire who's available. A lot of the, and I mean, other than being our Starbucks manager or barista, I'm not talking about those positions. And those are the ones that I keep seeing as you can be hired at this establishment, UPS, FedEx, and I'm going like, no, no, no. Not every older person wants to unretire, which is a new term you probably have heard mean coming out of retire and work at FedEx and UPS and Starbucks. They don't want to be on their feet all day. Maybe some of them do because they like the engagement, they like the conversation, but other people have more scalable skills that they could use. They want to do something else. So those are the two things I'm watching amongst the other things. But just for a plug for tomorrow, Daisy Wright and I are going to have a conversation on LinkedIn Audio about audio workers. I plan to go where no man has gone before in discussing it. So we'll see how that turns out. Uh, and if you get a chance to join us, but I think we need to talk about okay, how are companies hiring? Are companies really hiring, or they're just talking because they need to put some food on the table? Only thing that they see is something that they left in the refrigerator for a long time. The older workers can't be used as leftovers all the time. So we'll have that conversation. But um, thank you all very much for joining me, Robin Ryan, Hannah Morgan, Jack Kelly, for this version of Job Search Trends 2024. Hopefully, the rest of you all. Do you guys have any parting shots? I'll start with you, Hannah.
I just want to echo what you were saying real quick about the older workers and what Robin was saying about the younger workers. I was just reading about Indeed. Brit wrote a recent article about predictions for 2024, and one of the
Mhm.
problems that we're facing right now in the workforce is that the boomers are sort of aging out. They're the largest portion of the workforce. Gen Y and Gen we're the middle. Gen X and Gen Y, we're sort of not as big. We're much smaller, so there's a shortage in the workplace. The next largest generation of the workforce is Gen Z. They're the young ones that Robin was talking about that have different expectations for the workplace.
Mhm.
So we've got boomers sort of moving out, Gen Z coming in with a different set of expectations. How does that play out?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. Jack, you have any parting
Yeah,
shots?
I would say this for it, people watching who are looking for a job. Um, I think this is the kind of market where you're going to really have to take control of your own job search and your career
Mhm.
because it's going to be tough. The odds are it's going to be tough. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it turns, that you pull a page in the calendar and everything is better. But to play it safe, it's not going to be like anyone's going to knock on your door and say, "Here you go. Here's a job. Everything is great."
Right?
So you really have to listen to people like Robin and Hannah and folks who really know their stuff so that you're prepared and you just don't
Hmm.
kind of stumble around like, "Hey, what do I do now?" And you want to get ahead of the rush because right now I know it's holiday period. It's easy to say, "Hey, I'm just going to wait." I would say no. Start now. Get a career coach. Get a resume writer. Someone to help you with LinkedIn. You know, go and start working on your elevator pitch. Tap into your network. Twist arms to get a job lead. Do it all now because you could do it now because this is the holiday, so it's not weird to reach out to people you haven't seen. It's cool. It's okay. So I would say don't wait for like, all right, I'm going to wait for New Year and I'm going to do it then. No, right now. Start now. Start going because again, I hope I'm wrong, but if it's going to be a tough market, you're better off getting everything set up now so you don't have to scramble and then compete when everybody just rushes back into the market in the first or second week of January.
Right. Right. Robin?
Yeah. I want to give a message of hope because if you've lost your job, it gets very discouraging that it's not taking weeks, but it's probably going to take a couple months and it may take longer than that depending on what you look for. So keep in mind you only need one job.
Hmm.
Right? That's the first thing. And the other thing I advise people is cherry pick. Really look at, is this a good opportunity? Do I think I'll be able to use my skills? Do I like this potential manager? Am I going to be able to grow? Do I think I can make an important contribution? Because the reason why I say cherry pick is you want to go to a job where you're going to be able to stay there 3 or 4 years. This is not a, let's hop, skip, and a jump. For some people too, they react really fast. They just take the first thing they're offered. And then the next thing I know, 3 months later, they're Robin, I hate my job. So help me find another one. And so by picking more carefully, being thoughtful, if you turn something down today because it's not right, a couple weeks from now, the right thing will come along. So, think about what's best for your professional development and career management in terms of long term, not in terms of the next 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I really agree with all of you, and I think in the ending, in concluding, um, you're going to need a long takeoff strip, so to speak, uh, that you want to start, even if you things are going well at your job. That's the best leverage you have to change jobs. Is that's in your future. So you want to build, but you also want to have a nice landing strip as well, in the respect of if you are coming to the end as an older worker, to think, okay, really start thinking and start strategizing. What will my life be like in that economy? And if that means just that you're going to need to continue working, don't hesitate to not continue working. Don't hesitate and don't feel like you're obligated to retire. Of course, when a company starts pushing you out, and you can tell how they treated other past workers, that's your data point. If they've done that to everybody else, they're going to do it to you no matter what conversations you've had in the past, because what's going to come down is to budget and what it's going to look like for their future, and that will probably exclude you despite how they feel about you. So all of that to say, thank the rest of you all very much for joining us. This will be showing up on the podcast directory here in January, February, somewhere in there. I think it will be the 16th. January 16th is when I had this show going live on the podcast. Otherwise, you could just go to LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube to get it to play back and take some of the notes, especially all the good stuff that Hannah, Jack, and Robin saying about interviewing. I definitely would pay attention to that, because that is something that makes or breaks a job search for the most part, especially in the coming years. And the rest of you, thank you, Jack, Robin, Hannah. Out. Peace in the valley of love. Take care.
Thanks, Mark, for putting it together. Hey, it's great to see you, Robin.